Have you ever wondered why dogs kept barking at a particular person or thing, or at night when you sleep? Have you ever tasted a jollof rice so delicious that it changed the course of an entire village? In the quiet town of Ozala, a mysterious newcomer named Olaga arrived with nothing but a big three-legged pot and a secret recipe. Little did the villagers know that her hot, golden, sizzling jollof rice would not only captivate their taste buds, but also unravel a web of hidden truth. What secret does Olaga hold, and how will her presence affect the close community of Ozala? Sit back and let's dive in. In the peaceful village of Ozala, life moved slowly. The villagers woke up early, fetching water from the stream, tending to their farms, and gathering in the evening under a big iroko tree to discuss their day's event. Everyone knew each other. It was a place where news traveled fast, and secrets did not stay hidden for long. The people of Ozala were simple but superstitious. They believed in spirit ancestors and the power of the unseen. Even though modern life was creeping into the village, many still held on to the old ways. If a child fell sick or something strange happened, they would first consult the village elders or visit Ikuku, the town's herbalist. One day, a new face arrived in Ozala village. Her name was olaganma. She moved into the village quietly, renting a small hut at the edge of the market square. No one knew much about her past, and she didn't offer any details either. But it didn't take long for the villagers to warm up to her. Olaga wasted no time settling up her jollof rice business. Her big pot was always busy, and the smell of sizzling hot party jollof quickly spread through the market. People began to gather around her stall, drawn by the mouth-watering aroma. Her jollof rice was perfect, very tasty and appetizing. One could get hungry by just looking at it, with the big mold of goat meat she always put for her customers. Word of her hot jollof rice spread like wildfire, and soon it wasn't just the people of Ozala flocking to her stall. Even the people from neighboring villages began to visit, eager to test the most talked about jollof rice. Everyone was talking about it. In the evening, you could hear people at her stall arguing over who would get the next batch of hot bowl of jollof rice straight from the cooking pot. There were always long lines at her stall, and sometimes tempers would flare as people jostled for a place in the line. "I came first," one man would shout. "No, you didn't. I have been here. I have been standing here before you." Another would argue. Olaganma would only smile at them as she continued to dish out the hot jollof. "There is enough for everyone," she would say calmly. But even with that, the crowd and the noise, nobody ever seemed to mind to wait. The villagers couldn't get enough. Most people couldn't go a day without eating from her stall, and they praised her endlessly for her skill. Some men even commented that his wife's jollof rice is nothing compared to Olaganma's jollof. "Olaganma's jollof rice is the best I have tasted so far," Chioma, one of her regular customers, would say with a smile. "I can't go a day without buying from her. In fact, she even makes me lazy to cook at home." Everyone agreed that Olaga's hot sizzling jollof rice was the best thing to happen to the village. It became a routine for most people. The moment her three-leg pot hit the fire, a crowd would gather. People people craved it so much that it became part of their daily lives. But why the villagers were drawn to her jollof? Not everyone in Ozala seemed to be a fan, especially the dogs in the neighborhood. Whenever Olaga passed by carrying her bowl of ingredients and grounded tomatoes and pepper, the village dogs behaved strangely, as though they could sense something nobody else could. Olaga rarely spoke about her past or why she had moved to Ozala. The villagers, curious at first, eventually accepted her silence. What mattered to them was her hot pot of jollof rice, which had become the talk of the village and beyond. But why the villagers couldn't get enough of her food? There was something else happening that was becoming hard to ignore. From the day Olaga arrived the village dogs reacted strangely whenever she passes by. They would bark loudly, growl, and sometimes even chase after her. As days passed, the barking didn't stop. In fact, it seemed to get worse. The dogs weren't just following the smell of food. They were barking at Olaga herself. Even when her pot was empty, the dogs would bark as though they were chasing something unseen. At first, the villagers brushed it off. It's the smell of the food, they say. Who wouldn't want to taste any of that hot jollof rice and succulent goat meat, they say. I'm sure the dogs want some too. Another villager added, smiling. The explanation seemed simple enough. The sight of dogs chasing after food wasn't unusual, especially with the delicious aroma that filled the air around Olaga's store. But as days passed, the barking didn't stop. It only got louder and more aggressive. Even when Olaga wasn't carrying her foodstuff, the dogs will still bark continuously whenever they saw her. Some villagers thought it was because Olaga is new to their village. The dogs just need to get used to her. One of the villagers, Ikenna's father, said, once they know her, they will stop barking. For a while, this seems like a reasonable explanation. Ozala was a small community and strangers were rare. Perhaps the dogs simply needed time. But as the barking continued and grew more intense, it became clear that something else was at play here. The strange behavior of the dogs continued, and it didn't take long for Chioma to grow more uneasy. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper going on. The barking was no longer just an odd occurrence. It seemed to happen every single time Olaga passed by, and it was getting harder to ignore. Chioma had always liked Olaga. She visited her store almost every morning, drawn not just by the delicious jollof rice, but by Olaga's kind nature. Yet, the constant barking was unsettling. It gnaws at her mind, making her wonder if there was more to Olaga than meets the eye. One evening, Chioma sat with her grandmother outside her hut, watching the sun set over the village. The air was calm, but her mind was filled with questions. After a long silence, she finally spoke up. "Grandma, do you think there is something wrong with her?" she asked, her voice hesitant. The dogs won't stop barking at her. It's like they see something we can't. Her grandmother, an old woman with silver gray hair and deep wrinkles carved by time, looked at her thoughtfully. "Dogs don't bark like that for no reason," she said, her voice soft but firm. "They see what the eyes of men cannot see." Chioma frowned. "But why? She's just a jollof rice seller." Her grandmother shook her head. "Sometimes things are not as simple as they appear. There are forces beyond what we don't understand. If the dogs won't stop barking at her, there must be a reason." Chidinma's heart raced. What should I do, Grandma? The old woman leaned forward, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. There is a woman in our home village. Her name is Mirima. She is known to know things beyond the ordinary. People say she has a gift. She can see what is hidden and speak with the spirit. Chioma had heard stories of Mirima before. The elderly woman was known for her wisdom and her ability to see beyond the physical world. Many people had visited her in the past for guidance, but it was rare to hear her name spoken openly. You must visit her, Grandma continued. If you truly want answers, Miroma will only know what to do. But be prepared, sometimes the truth is not what we expect. Chioma swallowed hard. She wasn't sure what she was hoping to find. But the thought of seeking out Miroma made her very nervous. Still, she knew she couldn't ignore what was happening. Olaga was too much of a mystery, and the dog seemed to know something no one else did. Thank you, Grandma, Chidinma said quietly. I will go tomorrow. The morning sun had barely risen when Chioma set off for her home village. Her grandmother had given her some food for the journey, and with a determination in her heart, she began the long walk along the narrow, dusty path that led to her childhood home. It had been years since she last visited, but the path was familiar. The village where Miroma lived was small, hidden away among tall trees and thick bushes. The further Chioma walked, the quieter the surrounding became, with only the sound of birds and the rustling of leaves keeping her company. The closer she got to the village, the heavier her thoughts felt. She wondered what Miri, the elderly woman known for seeing beyond the ordinary, would say about Olaga and the dogs that kept barking. After several hours, Chioma arrived her home village. It looked just as she remembered, with small huts scattered along the road and children playing in the fields. She didn't stop to greet anyone. Her mind focused on her mission. Miroma lived on the outskirts of the village in a small, quiet hut surrounded by trees, and Chioma approached the door slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. Summoning her courage, Chioma knocked softly on the wooden door. After a few moments, the door cracked open and Miri stood there as if she had been expecting her. The old woman was small and bent with age, her skin wrinkled from many years under the sun. Her eyes, however, were sharp and piercing, as though they could see through to your soul. I know you would come. Come in, Miri said quietly, stepping aside to let Chioma in. Chioma followed her inside the small, dimly lit room. The smell of herbs and dried leaves filled the air, and strange objects hung from the walls. Miroma motioned for Chioma to sit on a low stool near the fire. She studied Chioma for a long moment before speaking. You have come about Olaga, right? She said, her voice calm but serious. Chioma nodded her head, surprised that Miroma already knew. Yes, it's because of her. The dogs in the village, they keep barking at her. It's like they can sense something that we can't. My grandmother said you might know why. Miroma closed her eyes for a moment as though listening to something far away. When she opened them again, she looked directly into Chioma's eyes. The dogs are not barking without reason, she said softly. They sense something dark around Olaga, something that she carries with her wherever she goes. Chioma leaned forward, her heart racing. What is it? What has she done? But Miri shook her head. It is not for me to say. Olaga must speak the truth herself. If she is ever to be free of the shadows that haunted her, she must confess what she has done. Only then can she find peace. Chioma felt a weight settle in her chest. She had hoped Miroma would tell her the secret, but it seemed that Olaga was the only one who could reveal her secret by herself. What should I do? She asked, unsure of how to confront Olaga. Mary's voice was firm as she replied, "Go back to Ozala and ask her. She must say it with her own mouth, or the dark spirit will continue to follow her. The dogs will not stop barking until the truth comes out." Chioma nodded her head slowly, understanding the gravity of the task ahead. Miroma's words echoed in her mind as she stood to leave. "Thank you," Chioma whispered, feeling a mix of gratitude and uncertainty as she stepped out of the hut and began her journey back to Ozala. Her thoughts swelled with question. What could Olaga possibly be hiding? How would she react when confronted? Chioma didn't have the answers, but she knew that the time had come for the truth to be revealed. Chioma returned to Ozala village just as the sun was beginning to set. The village was quiet, the usual hustling of the market fading as people finished their evening meals and prepared for the night. But Chioma's mind was anything but quiet. Mary's words weighed heavily on her heart, and she couldn't stop thinking about what Olaga might be hiding. The dogs have already started barking in the distance as Chioma approached the market square. She saw Olaga packing up her store for the day. She seemed calm as she always did, carefully stacking her basket. But the barking of the dogs, though distant, served as a constant reminder that something was not right. Taking a deep breath, Chioma walked up to her. "Olaga, can I speak with you for a moment?" Olaga looked up at her with a smile on her lips. "Of course, Chioma. How have you been?" Chioma hesitated for a second, then glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "I need to ask you something very important." The smile faded from Olaga's face as she sensed the seriousness in Chioma's voice. "What is it?" she said, her tone suddenly cautious. Chioma stepped closer, her heart racing. "The dogs, they won't stop barking at you. It's been happening for weeks now, and it's getting worse. The whole village is starting to talk. And I visited someone for advice, someone who can see things others can't." Olaga's eyes widened slightly, but she said nothing. "I went to Miri the seer," Chioma continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "She told me that the dogs are barking for a reason, that they sense something dark around you. She said you are carrying a secret, Olaga. The secret that you have to confess if you ever want to find peace." There was a long silence between them. Olaga stared at Chioma, her face unreadable. For a moment, it seemed as though she might deny everything, but then suddenly something in her expression shifted. Olaga lowered her gaze and sighed deeply. "So Miriama knows," she murmured. Her voice was soft, almost defeated. She turned away from her. Chioma watched her, her heart pounding. "What is it, Olaga? What have you done? Talk to me." Olaga stood still for a long time, her back to Chioma. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotions. "I never wanted it to come to this," she said, her words slow and deliberate. I just wanted to make a living, to survive." Chioma waited for her, her pulse quickening as Olaga continued. "I wasn't always like this," Olaga began. "I had nothing. I grew up as an orphan, and later I lost my husband I have no child, and I became a widow with no family to support me. My hot jollof rice business was my only hope, but it was fading. No one came to buy from me. Everybody avoided me at the market as if I was a plague. I couldn't even make enough to feed myself. I was desperate. Tears filled her eyes as she spoke. That's when someone approached me one day. They offered me a way out, a way to turn things around. They told me that if I use water that was used in bathing a dead body, it will change everything. They said it will make my hot jollof rice irresistible and my business will thrive. Chioma's heart sank as she listened. Water from a corpse? She whispered, horrified. Olaga nodded her head, her voice barely audible now. Yes, water used to bathe a fresh corpse. I was told to add the water when cooking the jollof rice. At first, I refused. It sounded like madness, but I was desperate. I had no other choice. Chioma felt a chill run down her spine. So you did it? Yes, I did, Olaga admitted, wiping away the tears that is rolling down her cheeks. I only collected a small amount each time. Every month, I would travel to the village where they keep dead bodies in the morgue and gather little waters used in bathing them. And each time I cook with the water, it worked like magic. And I have never tasted any of my jollof rice since I started using the water because I was warned not to. She paused for a moment, her voice shaking. Chioma couldn't believe what she was hearing. So, why did you leave your village? Where did you come from? Chioma asked Olaga. Olaga lowered her head. People began to get suspicious. They couldn't explain the sudden success of my jollof rice because they knew my shop was always empty back then. They started asking questions, whispering about me, and I knew it was only a matter of time before they would find out the truth. So I left my village. I came to Ozala village to start over, hoping to leave it behind. And it worked, she continued. For a while, everything was going well here. No one knew me and my party jollof rice was popular, just like before. But then the dogs started barking. They sensed it. The dark spirit that follows me. I thought I could escape, but they found me again. Chioma stood in stern silence, the weight of Olaga's confession heavy in the air. Olaga, Chioma said gently, you have to confess. You can't keep living like this. The spirit won't leave you alone unless you tell the truth. Olaga nodded slowly, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I know. I have carried this burden for too long. The next morning, Chioma and Olaga quietly gathered the villagers in the market square. No one knew why they had been called, and most came out of curiosity. The elders sat at the front while others stood around whispering among themselves. They had no idea what was about to unfold. Chioma stayed close to Olaga as she prepared to speak. Olaga's face was pale and her hands shook slightly. But she knew this moment had to come. There was no turning back now. With the entire village gathered, Olaga stepped forward, her eyes scanned the crowd, her heart heavy with the burden she had carried for so long. The village was silent, waiting for her to speak. Taking a deep breath, Olaga began her confession. She told the villagers everything she had shared with Chioma the day before. The dark secret behind her reddish smoking hot jollof rice business. Her desperate decision to use corpse water and the curse that had followed her to Ozala village. She explained why the dogs had been barking and how she had tried to leave her past behind, only for it to catch up with her. As her words hung in the air, the crowd stood in stone silence. The villagers had never suspected the truth, and many gasped in shock as the story unfolded. Some couldn't believe what they were hearing, while others exchanged nervous glances. When Olaga finished, the elder stood up to discuss her fate. The crowd waited anxiously as Ikuku, the village elders and herbalists, stepped forward to speak. His expression was grave and his voice carried the weight of the decision that had to be made. Olaga, Ikuku said, "You have brought great harm to this village with your actions. You cannot remain here. The spirits are restless and they have followed you to our land. For this, you must leave." There was no protest from the crowd. The weight of the confession was too much, and the village elders had spoken. Olaga lowered her head, accepting her fate. She had known that this would be the outcome. "You have until sunset to gather your belongings," Ikuku continued. "After that, you must leave Ozala and never return again." The villagers slowly began to disperse, murmuring to each other about the shock of the event. Olaga remained where she stood for a moment, taking in the reality of what had just happened. The life she had tried to rebuild in Ozala had crumbled before her eyes. Chioma stayed behind, offering Olaga a quiet look of understanding. Though Olaga had made terrible choices, Chioma felt a deep sadness for her. She had been driven by desperation and now she had lost everything once again. By sunset, Olaga had packed her few belongings into a small bundle. With one last look at the village, she began her journey down the road, leaving Ozala village behind forever. The dogs, for the first time in months, were silent as they watched her leave. Olaga was gone by the time the sun had set. She had already left Ozala village with her small bundle of belongings slugged over her shoulders. The villagers resumed their usual routines, but the events of the day still weighed heavily on their mind. Whispers filled the air. People discussed the shocking revelation and the sudden downfall of the once beloved party Jollof seller. Men who had insulted their wives for poor cooking because of Olaga's jollof rice felt nothing but sorrow and embarrassment as they went back to apologize to their wives. In Ozala, life slowly returned to normal, but the memory of Olaga lingered. The market was quiet without her stall, and people often found themselves pausing in front of the empty space where she had once stood, turning her reddish jollof rice. Chioma, who had been at the center of the event that led to Olaga's downfall, reflected often on the woman's fate. She had hoped that Olaga would find peace, but deep down she knew the consequences of such dark actions could not easily be undone. The story of Olaga's rise and fall had touched every corner of Ozala village, reminding the villagers of the importance of honesty and the dangers of taking shortcuts for personal gain. Over time, Ozala village healed, but the lessons still remain. The villagers knew they had to be careful of the choices they made, for even the smallest decision could have lasting consequences, because no matter how far you run, you cannot outrun the truth.